Welcome to It's a Grand Life. Did you know that in the United States alone, 2.4 million kids are being raised by their grandparents or other family members other than mom or dad? 2.4 million. It's a Grand Life is a podcast for those grandparents and kinship caregivers who are committed to making a difference for those kids. Grand families are in every neighborhood, every city, tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you get your audio podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hi, my name is Craig Nash. I would like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And you are absolutely going to be blessed today. We've got an expert in two areas. We're going to find out about both subjects. Kimber Bishop-Yanke is an expert on, in fact, she's the head of the Oakland County Task Force on Poverty and Homelessness right here in Michigan. And she's got a lot to say about that. And that does impact our grand families. So we want to find out about the work that they're doing with that. And then next week, we're going to talk to her about her other work, which is empowering kids. And we, as you know, as grandparents and kinship caregivers, raising our grandkids, we want them empowered. And maybe some of us, like myself, are a little rusty in this arena because we haven't done it in a while. Well, Kimber's going to have some answers for us. But Kimber, welcome to It's a Grand Life. And we'd just like to welcome you and like to hear a little bit about how you got involved in the area of homelessness and also dealing with kids.
Thank you for having me. What happened is I was volunteering. I volunteered to organize our volunteers for the warming center. There is a warming center that takes place in Royal Oak. About 10 churches get together and they offer 1 to 2 weeks overnights. And somebody knew I did this, and so they asked me if I would help a 22-year-old girl who was sleeping in her car during the polar vortex. This is about 5 years ago. And I said, sure. I didn't think it would be too hard. I was wrong. I called all the numbers. We went to appointments, and we actually felt like we were on a hamster wheel. We just kept getting first to call, and nobody actually offered us or her any real help. So I got frustrated, and what I do with my anger is I do something about it. So I called one of our elected leaders, Christine Gregg. She was a minority leader for the Democrats at the time. And I just said, Chris, I was like, we have a problem in Oakland County. I'm like, I cannot find help for this girl. And she agreed that nobody had talked about the homeless issue in years. The former leadership was that if you didn't have the money to live in Oakland County, don't live in Oakland County. And, we were one of the richest counties in Michigan and even in the United States. So we really didn't have the infrastructure or the organizations to deal with what is a nationwide problem.
Right.
So what happened is she said, bring me a group of nonprofits and I'll bring you some elected officials. And we held the meeting at Genesis Church where the warming center is. And at that meeting, Representative Carter stood up and said she wanted to start a caucus on poverty and homelessness in the House and Senate, which they've done. First bicameral caucus on this issue in the country. And then she said, I'd like to start a local task force. And she said, would you help? And I said, sure, I will help because I don't complain unless I'm going to help. And then a couple weeks later, I saw on Facebook, I'd been promoted to chair. So I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I just started holding community meetings. So once a month, we would have speakers come in to try to learn about the issue, to try to understand it. And one of the participants worked for an organization called Communities in School. and she worked right in Pontiac High School. And she was telling me that they would send the kids home with cans of ravioli for dinner because they were hungry. And I just could not wrap my head around that in our community, that we still had hungry children, and especially with all the food banks. And she explained, well, lots of people don't have cars to get to the food banks. Lots of people are working. The food banks are open 2 hours at a time, or on this day or that day, and they only let you take one box of food, and that's, supposed to be for the whole month. So I had also had organized our Thanksgiving baskets at church for 8 years. So I thought, what if I could try to get like a fresh fruit and veggie, lay it out where people could come volunteer, pack a basket, and we would deliver it to people who didn't have cars. And so my plan was March 20th of 2020, 25 families, if that gives you any indication of where this is going. And 2 weeks before that date is when they shut all the schools down for COVID. Oh. So my business got shut down completely because I work with kids, I go into schools, so it got shut down. And so I threw myself into this food delivery. We ended up delivering to 250 families and like a month's worth of food. And I had 50 amazing volunteers. And so then I heard that Oakland University, Jennifer Lucarelli, Cam Underdown, they had formed something called My COVID Response, which was an app in which they were matching volunteers with people that needed food. And so we joined their efforts. And every Saturday during COVID, we packed up food and put it into people's cars. Wow. And what happened is, our volunteers were, meeting families, and one of the moms said, my seven-month-old baby is sleeping in a dresser drawer. Can you get us a crib? And so all of a sudden our team started delivering furniture. And I had another nonprofit that was collecting all the funds for us. And then that Christmas, 2 days before Christmas, I got a call from the Pontiac School District, and they said, I have a mom who has COVID, and she has 6 children. 3 have COVID, and the grandmother had kicked them out of the house because she was scared. Right. And there was nowhere for her to go. And boy, that was scary to feel like I was like taking the responsibility of this family. So we put them in a hotel because we didn't know, what are the options? There were no options. Right. And so all of a sudden we found ourselves putting people in hotels that didn't have anywhere to go. In our community of Oakland County, we only have one family shelter that has only 18 spots. So only 18 families can be helped. We have one adult shelter with 60 spots, men and women together in one room, which a lot of women will not go because they've had trauma, right, in their lives. And then we have the temporary shelter of 10 weeks in Royal Oak. The Welcome Inn is the day center, and then the churches do the nights. So we do not have the infrastructure, the shelter beds to handle the problem. And what happened is during COVID, everybody's leases expired. Right. And then when COVID was over, the landlords, there was a housing shortage. And so the landlords raised rent, sometimes $500, $600. But these moms with kids that are working at Wendy's and McDonald's, right, they did not get $500, $600 paycheck increases. And so all these families got evicted. And now we have a huge crisis with no funding, no infrastructure. And really, like, I feel like I'm on the street corner screaming, hey, we need help over here. Right. Well, how bad is it? I mean, it sounds like it's just, you thought 25
baskets was going to be great. Then it turned into 250. And now, so this is your fifth year in the homeless world. So how bad is it, Kimber?
It is bad. We have, so HUD says you're homeless, you're category 1 homeless, if you're on the streets, in the car, in a shelter or a hotel paid for by a nonprofit. Last year, I spent $150,000 putting people in the hotel. There are families that have been living in the hotel for over 2 years that they're paying for their own hotel room, and they cannot get any help, and they are not considered homeless. They got evicted. They had nowhere to go. They went to a hotel, but they have poor credit. They have an eviction on their record. Most landlords require you make 3 times your monthly rent. And they don't have $3,000, $4,000 to pay for a deposit,
right,
and for rent. So these families, some people are calling it purgatory, because they're stuck, and there's no organizations, there's no funding to help these families. We probably have 3,000 people in Oakland County alone that are homeless.
Wow.
And school kids that do not have a stable place to sleep. So kids who are couch surfing.
Yep.
We've got families that maybe the one kid is with one aunt and another kid is with a grandparent and another kid is over here and the parents are sleeping in their car. So kids are considered homeless if they have an unstable place to sleep. So we probably, I don't know the exact number, but we're talking 5,000, 6,000 kids that are considered homeless in Oakland County.
And, we have listeners all over the country, and I don't know if they know about Oakland County. Oakland County was the wealthiest county in the country at one time. This is where all the automobile executives lived and have the beautiful housing. So for you to say there's 6,000 kids in Oakland County that they do not have permanent places to sleep is tragic. And yes, we're a half hour from inner city Detroit, but you would not have both entities in the same sentence where you're when I used to work with the Open Door Rescue Mission at McDougal and Gratiot in the city of Detroit. We dealt with a serious homelessness there, but we had no clue at the time that there's anything like this going on in Oakland County. And that must have really shocked you.
It did. And, unfortunately, the country is experiencing this problem. So it's a crisis in the making for years. And I just think we need innovation, we need leadership, we need visionaries, we need our community to say, we're not going to accept this. And we need to come together. I feel it's our responsibility. I don't think we need to wait for the government because the wheels move slowly, right? We need business leaders.
Right.
We need people who are movers and shakers. I have been able to, raise about $400,000 now a year. We pay first deposits, back rent. We try to keep a family from becoming homeless because the research shows that once they go into a shelter, it's like a rabbit hole.
Right.
So we want to try to keep people in their homes. So one of the projects I'm working on is building affordable housing out of shipping containers.
Oh, that's great. And how's that going?
Well, it's a brand new project. And tonight, actually, Greg Evans, who is sort of the mastermind behind it, he's making his first pitch tonight to the Woodward 100 Men's Group. So to be our first actual presentation, and hopefully they'll think it's, hopefully they'll donate some funds to it. But what's going to be different about this is that we're going to provide services on site so that anybody who lives in these homes will have access to a case manager who will be trying to help them with food or legal issues or electricity. The problem with the system is that the person in need has to call the 20 numbers, and it gets confusing even for our team to navigate trying to work through the system. It's so confusing, so frustrating. So we want to hold people's hands on how to navigate that system. And the organizations aren't working together. So a person might call, one organization over here, one organization over here, but those organizations are not talking. So you get like the person gets the knife, but they don't get the fork and the spoon.
That sounds like government, doesn't it? Where they're not communicating. And I hope you're also including insurance companies in that discussion, because if you can do some triaging with these patients, I look at them as patients, you're calling residents or clients, and if you can keep them out of the hospital, that's what the work we used to do. We were saving total healthcare $40,000 per patient a year. And just by having someone there to be their advocate and call those numbers, first of all, know which numbers to call, and then call those numbers and get the support services intact. And it's just makes such a difference. But the system is overwhelming. And
well, we use that analogy actually to be like an emergency room.
Right.
Somebody comes in and then we triage them. And I'm also part of another collaboration that's called the Helping Network, and that's our goal. Is we're renting a space in Pontiac, and we're gonna hopefully have volunteers to answer phones, to answer people to walk in. We're gonna have printers and computers so that people can fill out their paperwork. I will send you the email that homeless people get. It has 14 different attachments. So please tell me how a homeless person whose phone is being shut off every other day can manage 14 attachments. That a lot of it is not helpful information at all.
And perhaps repetitious in parts, and put your social security down 10 times and all these other things. And yes, I've seen a lot of that paperwork. It's redundant and just a quagmire. And those are the wrong folks they had enough on their plate to wrestle with 14 pages of an intake form. So
well, no, that's 14 different attachments. So it's attachment. It's not an intake form. It is, food, affordable housing, electricity, and most of those services, some of them don't even, the nonprofits closed. Like the information's bad information on those forms. Yeah.
So they want to track like social determinant information and that's great information, but that's a lot to ask someone to fill out.
These are not to fill out. These are just like, here's our 20 numbers to call.
Oh, so it's a handout.
Yes. Yes. And the person never gets to the person to actually do the, intake.
Exactly. It's like they're walking around with file folders, keeping all this organized and everything. Just very unrealistic. So
people's birth certificates and driver's license are one of the biggest barriers. Transportation, a big barrier.
Right. Yeah. And any one of those pieces of information, if they're missing, can delay the process, right? So you would say that we're going in the wrong direction in our battle against poverty.
Yes.
And instead of it getting easier or going down, it's exploding, and it's and the cost of living is just crazy right now, let alone rent. And that's not only in Michigan, that's all over the country. It's just really been impacted by the high cost of things. And so do you ever interact with grand families, kinship caregivers that are dealing in the homeless arena? And what would you say to first, yes, let us know about that. But then what would you say to our grandparents who are heading toward homelessness? What can they do to prevent that, or to have a plan in place so they don't end up on the street?
Yeah, that's the other thing is a lot of people wait until they're sort of in that crisis mode. So there is, every community has something called the continuum of care. So we have a nonprofit in our community called Alliance for Housing. We have something called the HARA, which is the homelessness area resource. That's community housing. So everybody in our community is supposed to call community housing, which I can send you that information. And they are supposed to do an assessment and intake. So if you're lucky, you might get into a program, but there are very few programs out there. So for example, I did recently have a grandson who became homeless. He actually let his grandson move into his senior housing, and then he got evicted because that's not allowed.
Right.
And so lucky for him that we paid for his hotel for I think 3 or 4 or 5 months, and then we got him a voucher, and we were able to get him housing pretty quickly. He was one of the very lucky ones, because we're seeing most people don't get vouchers for months or years, and it's very difficult because he only had one grandchild. It was much easier for him.
Okay.
We had a grandmother who is taking care of 8 grandchildren. She lived in her home for 34 years, and she was grandfathered in. So their rent was only something like $500. They were in a townhouse. Her husband died suddenly, and that's how they paid the rent, through his disability. So when somebody dies, the disability gets cut off immediately.
Right.
And by the time the grandmother, was in shock and grieving, she had to apply for Social Security, all of that, which takes months and months and months because they weren't prepared. And the landlord, there were organizations that stepped up and said, we will pay the $3,500 this grandmother owes to keep her in the home. And the landlord said, nope, because as soon as he got them out, he was able to raise the rent like by $1,000.
Right.
So he wanted them out.
Right.
And so now she's living with her 8 grandchildren in a mobile home, which we bought. We actually raised the money and bought 6 mobile homes because during COVID, there was no place to live. And, we thought, okay, mobile homes, this seems like a reasonable solution here.
Right.
But the problem is that if you don't buy a very nice mobile home, there are lots of problems with these mobile homes. And then the lot fee is $600, $700, in this tiny little square. So we have 3 families, 4 families are successful. One was a domestic violence victim. She kept letting her abuser come back. I was calling the police all the time.
Wow.
So we had to get her out of there because she didn't pay rent for 6 months. And I co-signed on all of these. So if they don't pay, the burden is on me to raise the money. And we have another couple in there who they're probably going to get evicted. And it's really frustrating. They've been living there for 3 years, but, one of them didn't want to work. And it was like, okay, you guys have 4 kids, and, you got to do what you got to do.
Right. You got to help.
Yeah. And so they're probably going to get evicted. It's like there's certain, we are very full of grace, and we understand It takes, I read a Wall Street Journal article that said something like it takes $150,000 to get a person from homelessness back on their feet. And it takes like a year. And that's part of the issue, is that some of these nonprofits, maybe they fill out the paperwork, they get that family a voucher, but
Right.
that family has complex issues. And so, like, yeah, you got them into a home, but you didn't help them with their legal issue, or they didn't have a car, or they're not where they can get a job. So really, we need to be very hands-on, and help these families and stick with them for like a year.
Right. So they can make a proper transition and stay on the right path. And so in the few minutes we have left, Kimber, can you share with our listeners what they can do to, if they're starting to see that homelessness is going to become a reality, what can they do a month or two ahead of time? Or what time frame would you recommend for these folks to have a smooth transition?
Well, this is the other problem is that all these organizations say you have to be in court before they help you. So you already have to be in the eviction process before you can get help. And so what happens is people are already going down the rabbit hole when the help can start to come. Basically becoming aware of what your resources are. So, like, for example, I had a gentleman call me the other day. His court was at 1 o'clock and for eviction. And I said, have you called legal aid? No, I went to the first court date by myself. No, you need to have somebody represent you. And because I have a direct contact, I was able to get him a court person, a lawyer that was there to help him. And then the lawyer negotiated an amount of time for him to pay that back. And then we were able to help pay part of his back rent. But all the time, it's like I'm trying to catch people because they go down the rabbit hole before they make these phone calls. So really becoming aware of who is it in your community that helps and what kind of help they give. So I would highly recommend nobody goes to court without having a lawyer represent them. And there in our community, we have something called St. Vincent de Paul, where they will send a volunteer out, and that volunteer will help them like do their budget and connect to resources. So that's a fabulous organization. In our community, if you live in Pontiac, there's an organization called CCRT that will pay back rent and deposits. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of those organizations that actually have the funding to do that. And then this is another thing, is that people get storage units. So we've got homeless people that are paying for 3 storage units. And I mean, you're talking $600, $700 a month that is just going into these storage units. So I would highly, highly advise getting rid of your stuff. You know what? You can get a couch donated.
Right.
You can get dishes donated. It does not make sense to pay $700, $150 a month
per unit.
Yeah. And you're going to be, people who are homeless, it's usually 8 months, a year. So It's crazy.
It absolutely is. And so, Kimber, what if folks wanted to get in touch with your organization, what's the best way to do that?
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people will also, because maybe they can't pay rent, like let's say their rent is $1,200 and they only have $400. It would be better if your landlord will not allow you to pay the $400. It'd be better for you to give that $400 to a friend, keep it safe for you, because people have a hard time getting that big total amount of dollars. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like if you have 400 here and 200 here, like then it can help you get to that $1,400. So if people want to reach me, we do have a website, kidsempoweredonthemove.org. So it's empowered, which is the word power, ed.com, on the move. We have a Facebook page, Oakland County Task Force on Homelessness and Poverty. And my telephone number is 248-757-0912.
That is absolutely great. And all that information will be at the bottom of our screen when we go live on this. So, but Kimber, thank you so much for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life. We want you to come back next week and talk about the kids. We've talked about the situation with the homelessness in Oakland County. It's just, you've just really taken the lid off it this afternoon, and I'm just blown away by all that. But I look forward to hearing more, and hope you know that you always have an open invitation to come and share whatever's going on in the homeless world with us, because we want our community, in fact, communities all over the country, to know how bad this situation is, and we all need to do our part. So
yes, and that's what I would like to encourage, is that every person can do something, whether you're, you can make phone calls, or you're a lawyer and you can help legally, or you're an accountant. Every one of us can do something to help with this problem.
And we've had many guests on our show that we should touch base with to see if they can join your force. So thanks so much for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life, and look forward to seeing you next week for our second show on Kids Empowered. But thanks so much. Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.